Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
Well, Dan, we have a very unusual guest lined up now. His name is Theo Armenteros. He's a co-founder of Theo, and correct me if I say the name wrong, but he's co-founder of Kimera Koffee, and the coffee is extraordinarily good, and also, if I heard them correctly, it's brain food as well. Theo, welcome to the program.
Thank you. You actually I think you're the first person that's pronounced my last name correctly, so seems like you've been taking your Kimera Koffee.
Oh, I got to look out the window for the next coming. It's a miracle. but Theo, tell us about your company, your coffee, and why you think it's so good for your brain.
Okay, so our company is we run it, and it's based out of Dominican Republic. It's a U.S. company, but we run it down from the island. The three business partners, myself and my other two business partners, we all live down there, and we were looking for a product that would actually display the benefits of what is the Dominican Republic on a global scale. So we were drinking coffee. We love the coffee from the island. And at the same time, we were also taking nootropics as a pre-workout. Nootropics are the brain vitamins that are in the coffee that we mix in to our proprietary blend. So 3 years ago, about 3-4 years ago, we decided to go ahead and launch this company. It all came as an inspiration from listening to radio shows and listening to podcasts and just hearing from people to just get up and go and do something and make a change in this world. So that's how Kimera came to be.
Oh, well, spell out your coffee and your website for our audience.
So Kimera is spelled Kimera, and coffee is with a K, Koffee, and it's coffee from the Dominican Republic with nootropics. Nootropics are basically brain vitamins. That's the easiest way to describe them. We have 4 specific nootropics, which are taurine, DMAE, L-theanine, and alpha-GPC.
And Dan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Theo, thanks for joining us today. The first question I have to ask is, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, it's more rhetorical than anything else. Does the world really need another coffee?
Well, I guess the world always needs more coffee, to tell you the truth. But there's a lot of coffee brands. We were lucky to get into this whole coffee resurgence or renaissance a bit early. One of the things it was actually Frank that was pushing. I just wanted to come out with a gourmet coffee because I wanted to show people that the island has a lot more to offer than tourism. And Frank said, let's go ahead and make it a bit different and put in the brain vitamins in it. So you're already taking coffee in the morning, you might as well take a multivitamin. And the brain vitamins that we took, we were very specific in that we wanted them to have research behind it. We get most of our research from the sports medicine and the Library of Medical Research. You can find all our links on our blog. We didn't want to sell snake oil. I'm not saying other vitamins are snake oil, but we wanted something to have
yes, they
some
are.
sort of studies behind it. Yeah.
Some are. So, so you got this new coffee. It's got brain food out, and so now, where did you take it?
So at first, it was challenging because we didn't want to start a company and just like launch it out there. We wanted to do everything correctly. So we started, each of us, I think, with like $5,000, and it was baby steps for each goal. We found first a source. We worked directly with the farmers. So our main, we didn't want a middleman. We wanted to interact and learn about our product. Each harvest, we learn more about our coffee. Once we formed our company in Dominican Republic, we went ahead and we went on LegalZoom.com, which you listen to it all the time, all over the web, like LegalZoom.com, do this. And that's how we formed our company. And it was just steps to get the permits, steps to get on Amazon. It's like, and when you realize, you look back and you already accomplished miles and miles of work.
So what? But you is Amazon your principal distribution?
Yeah. So we sell probably 70% of our sales are through Amazon. So from the Dominican Republic, we actually send the coffee to Amazon. As I said, 70% of it to Amazon, and the other 30% to a fulfillment center in Philadelphia. So we do that every 2 to 3 months. We restock, and obviously the coffee has an expiration date, so we try to keep it fresh and our blend going.
But if 30% is not Amazon,
no,
70%
it's directly
is Amazon.
through.
But where does the 30% go? Who gets
the other 30% is either directly to our warehouse, which if you buy from our website, KimeraKoffee.com, those sales are shipped from that 30%. And the other is we have a distributor in Australia that purchases a lot of our coffee. He gets some of that 30%. And another one in Ireland, which gets a little bit less of that 30%.
So you're basically wholesaling coffee. You're not really retailing. You're using intermediaries to. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we sell wholesale to Australia and Ireland, but I wouldn't say that the Amazon are wholesale because we need Amazon sells it. It's our web store, so Amazon sells it. Amazon fulfills it, but they only pay us what we sell, so it's retail. I don't know nowadays if that would consider to be retail or wholesale. I think it's retail.
Well, but you don't have stores like Starbucks to sell your coffee.
Correct. That's our 2018 goal, to tell you the truth.
Because you want to have stores.
Yeah, right now we sell them in a couple of brick and mortars. They buy, I would say, like 50 bags, 40 bags. We're lucky enough that the Seattle Seahawks, they actually buy all their coffee is from us and during their season. So that's been a good contact to have.
Dan, can I jump in?
Sure.
Jump in here. You sell to the Seattle Seahawks?
Yes, we just installed a couple of weeks ago. We installed a nitro brew machine because they were consuming so much coffee. We actually installed a nitro brewer, which is cold brew coffee, and it's pushed out through nitrogen, and it comes out like a beer. It looks like a dark ale, and it's really good actually.
Oh, how did you get that contact?
We had a client that actually was purchasing our coffee, and he owned a gym in San Francisco, and I guess he knew the nutritionist at the Seattle Seahawks, and he either sent her a bag of coffee or told her about the coffee, and this is our third year working with them. So we've been very happy, and they're happy with the coffee. So.
And you don't use that as an advertising?
You know what? We're gonna go shoot some videos in November. We're gonna go up to Seattle and shoot some videos. We didn't want to use that as an advertising because they were just buying it from us. We didn't want to go ahead and maybe damage that relationship. Maybe they don't want us to say that. But right now, we just installed this big machine, and it has our huge logo on it. So we are going to use it as advertising, yes.
I'm sorry, Dan, I had to break in because that's fascinating that someone did. It's so difficult to do that. Back to you, Dan.
Well, I agree. It was fascinating. The idea that you could in 3 years bring your product from the Dominican Republic. Did you say that right? The Dominican Republic, is that correct?
Yeah, the Dominican Republic.
So I have to ask you the question, being a resident of Southwest Florida, and then just gone through the hurricane. Did the hurricanes damage any of your crops?
No, our crops are located like in the center of the island, and the hurricane just brushed the north. It did flood the northern areas of the country. We were lucky. When I see what happened in Puerto Rico, I mean, we were really lucky, and I don't think the island could be able to withstand those 2 hurricanes that just passed on full effect.
Okay, let's go back to your product. Do you put the vitamins or the supplements in after you roast the coffee or before?
So we put it after we roast it. So that's interesting. We actually have the coffee farm is up on the mountains. It's like 4,000 feet. Our facility is about an hour away from there. So we bring the coffee down and we wet process, roast, and grind the coffee in the same area. So everything's done like meters away from each other. And once the coffee is roasted and ground, then the best way to describe it is we have this big, it looks like a cement mixer, like this huge food grade cement mixer. We put the nootropics in there with the freshly roasted ground. It has to be in a specific temperature for the grounds to actually like absorb it. And then we package it right away.
So who decided the formula of the 4 ingredients for the brain food?
It's actually Frankie. When I came up with the idea, my original job is real estate development. I was super busy, so Frankie, who was going to be your guest, but he's swamped with work, he spent about a year going through 52 different formulas. We had an original formula, but the FDA didn't. If we wanted our original formula, it would have to be categorized as a dietary supplement. And when a food is categorized as a dietary supplement, there's a whole different rules and regulations that we didn't really want to abide to. So the FDA basically gave us a list of approved nootropics, and they were similar to a formula that we had, and that's how we broke down. That's how we came to our final version of the formula now.
Is your coffee being served on the island at cafes and restaurants?
Yes, it is. It is. We sell on the islands. If you actually go to our website, it has about 8 brick and mortars that it's sold in our island. A lot of them are gyms actually, because we've realized that most of the fitness community has taken the coffee as a pre-workout.
Now, my wife drinks the cold coffee. Would that be something you would use before or after a workout?
Before. I actually drink the cold coffee also. I've been doing it for about 2 years. So I cold brew it. I cold brew an entire batch on the weekends for my whole week. And if I'm going to go for a jog, I just take a shot of the cold brew. I know when you do cold brew, it creates a cold brew concentrate, so you're supposed to add water to that. But if I'm going to go to the gym, I just take a shot of that cold brew concentrate, and it'll give me the boost I need. And especially with Kimera, since it has the taurine, kicks in right away, so it'll give you that extra little boost.
So you said that in 2018, your plans are to start to go to brick and mortar.
Yes, we're
Where?
Actually working
in the States.
In the States, yeah, in the States. We're actually so my wife works for Mass General, so I moved to Boston. So I spent part of the month in Boston and part of the month in Dominican Republic with Kimera. So we're going to do a little test in the Boston area with Kimera Coffee cart. So it's going to be like a movable brick and mortar. So eventually our goal is to have is to start out with a bunch of these little coffee carts serving the Kimera Koffee cold brew, nitro brew, and one form of hot brew, and eventually through that grow into a physical brick and mortar.
That's a clever plan, don't you think, Dan?
Yeah, he's going to use the food carts as his distribution, and then he's going to expand the size of his food cart and park it in one place and make it a brick and mortar. Now, did you hear the previous? We had another guest on earlier this week, and he's got a quick service kiosk delivery where they build 450 square foot buildings to distribute their coffee in and out in a minute or less. And they're not building the big Starbucks stores. They're building small 450 square foot with 4 employees kiosks. And they're seem to be growing quite well in the Midwest, but you're going into a really tough market in the Boston area with Starbucks and other coffee companies. So is it going to be primarily marketed as brain food, or how are you going to market it?
We're going to market it as a pre-workout and as a brain food. How we tell people is just what I mentioned in the beginning is, if you're going to drink coffee, if you actually buy the coffee and the nootropics separate, it's expensive. Like nootropics is probably over $1 a day. So with this, you're getting the benefits of both. Maybe you don't even like the nootropics, but you like the coffee, so you might as well have an added effect.
So the nootropics don't add or detract from the flavor of the coffee?
No, they actually, one of the nootropics actually removes the bitterness from the coffee, which is something that when we first launched the coffee, we were seeing all these reviews on Amazon. Your coffee's so smooth, your coffee's so smooth. And one of our ambassadors, who is really interested in all these, like the chemical breakdown of stuff, he actually pointed it out that one of the nootropics is neutralizing the mouth bacteria, which is it's one of the nootropics that's a green tea extract. It's neutralizing the mouth bacteria, and that's what actually gives the coffee a smooth, no bitter aftertaste.
A break for one of our sponsors.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer.
We're talking with Theo Armenteros. He's one of the founders of Kimera Koffee. It's been a fascinating experience. Theo, please spell out Kimera for our guests and where they can get it for our audience.
So you can get Kimera Koffee at our website. It's www.KimeraKoffee.com. It's Kimera Koffee, both with a K.
Go ahead, Dan.
So I want to ask you a question. As we talked about just before the break, East Coast, West Coast, tough markets, city of Boston, big metropolitan area, big Starbucks stronghold. And you talked about you're starting with your carts, and then you're thinking about going to brick and mortar.
Yes, so not only Starbucks, this is the home of Dunkin' Donuts, so it's even tougher there. So we're actually, our main plan is going towards the Cambridge area where all the students are, the Harvard students. That's what we're going to be focusing on, which is we're going to do that here because I'm actually living here, but our number one market is actually California and then Texas. Then it's equally around like the East Coast.
So when you sell, right now you said you're selling it on Amazon, and
correct.
You're selling it on your website.
Correct.
Right. How does it compare in cost to other premium brand coffees?
Okay, so the premium, that's a very good question. The premium brand coffee starts from $18. Most of them are in the $18 to $25 range. There's some exceptions that are like $50, but that's an exaggeration. I've had them. They're good, but I mean, not $50 worth. So we think that ours at $21.95 with the nootropics is actually pretty reasonable, because when you factor in nootropic pills independently, which are really good, I used to take them before, and you factor in the coffee, you'll be over that $21.95 limit. And that's something that we're lucky enough to have most of our clients understand it. That's why we've kept a 4.6 verified Amazon review rating, and we're super proud of that.
So when we look at what are we really selling here? Are we selling coffee? Or are we selling nootropics? Is the nootropics the differentiator that separates you from all the other coffees? And the coffee's good, but the nootropics is the thing that makes you different.
Exactly. The coffee is good, and with each harvest, we try to improve the coffee. But the key difference is the nootropic. When we launched 3 years ago, we were the only company in the world that was doing coffee with nootropics. About a year ago, I saw that there's 2 companies that started doing it. They're a bit more expensive. I think that we have a benefit of being so close to Florida that our shipping costs are a bit easier, and they help us with that. But yes, to answer your question, our main selling point is the nootropics. You're getting the benefits of the nootropic while drinking the coffee.
So as more and more competitors come into the market, does that make it more competitive for you to survive?
I think right now, since the amount of people in the market is limited, I think it's actually helping us grow, because we're seeing that more people are searching nootropics and coffee together, both on Amazon and throughout Google. So I think right now it's actually helping that we're having more competition, because one of the things that is limiting our growth is actually our marketing budget. We think the coffee will sell itself once people know about it and at least give it a try, because we have a 100% satisfaction refund. If you don't like the coffee, you just write us an email, let us know, and we'll refund you the money. No questions asked.
How do you package it now?
We package it on a regular 12-ounce package, and it's a good question that you asked that, because right now we just bought a huge nitro flush machine, which actually will preserve the coffee for 18 months. The only thing that is giving us bad reviews on Amazon, as I said, we have 4.6 stars. We wanted that perfect review. So the only thing that's giving us that lower stars is actually that the coffee obviously being ground, it goes stale. So we were doing some research into how to improve this, and the best way we found is obviously to vacuum seal it, but we don't want to affect the presentation of the bag. We don't want a big vacuum sealed brick. So we did some research, and there's these machines that they use for potato chips. So they basically flush all the oxygen out twice. It'll suck it out twice, and then it'll fill it up with nitrogen. So you'll get the same package, but without any oxygen in it that'll oxidate the ground, and it'll last 18 months. So you can have a coffee a year afterwards, and you'll open it up, and it'll smell just like freshly ground coffee. It's actually what Blue Bottle Coffee and Starbucks use.
So have you seen, thinking about how do I merchandise this product, have you seen the small 1-cup vacuum sealed grounds packaging?
We're doing K-cups, but I haven't seen the small 1-cup. So is it just a little bag that you put into your Mr. Coffee or something?
No, it's basically a 1 cup, the grounds for 1 cup of coffee that are vacuum sealed. And it looks like a small candy bar. And they're individual portions. And sometimes you'll see them in gift packages, and baskets, and things like that from Harry and David and all of the, especially around Christmas time. You'll see these little tiny packages of coffee. And it's a way to get your coffee out into a broader distribution with a smaller packaging. But just something to think about.
Dan,
that's a good idea.
Yes, just Don.
Yeah. I hate to break it up. Fascinating guest, but we have to say goodbye. Theo, your name again, your company, and how people can find your product?
Okay, my name's Theo Armenteros from Kimera Koffee, KIMERAKOFFEE, KimeraKoffee.com. Find it there or find it on Amazon. And it was a pleasure being in and talking with you guys.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Now a word from our sponsor.
Before you hear this, or this, or even this, before you turn a key, step on the gas and let it rip, before you get up and out and on the road, you have to be fueled by something. Make sure that something is Valero. Valero top-tier certified quality fuel keeps your engine running cleaner, better, and longer. Find a station near you at ValeroCleanGas.com.
Well, Dan, our next guest I've been looking forward to for quite a while. His name is Bob Johansen. He's written a fascinating new book, and he's here to talk about an awful lot of things that I'm going to let him start you off. Bob, tell us about your newest book, what you do, and how people can learn more about you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a futurist based in Silicon Valley. I've been doing this 30 plus years, so I'm one of the few futurists that's actually outlived its forecasts. And this particular book is called The New Leadership Literacies, and it focuses on what it will take to lead, not just to survive, but to thrive in the world 10 years from now.
Well, Dan, you can start off.
Wow. Great opportunity. So let's start off with a basic question. Let's help our audience understand how a futurist outlived his time. So tell people what a futurist is, you as a futurist, what you do.
So we're an independent nonprofit think tank that started in 1968. So we've been doing 10-year forecasting since then. And over that time, 60 to 80% of our forecasted futures have actually happened. So the first question you should always ask a futurist is, have you outlived your forecast? And we have 5 times over. And we're usually right, but the purpose isn't to predict, it's to provoke insight. So we use our foresight, which is a plausible, internally consistent, provocative story from the future, and we're usually right. We use that to provoke insight, your insight, and ultimately to make better decisions in the present. So this is very practical futurism, if you will. It's not predicting the future. It's provoking insight in a very practical way.
So if we go back, you've been doing this, you said 30 years?
Since 1968, so 50.
50 years. What's the most profound thing that you've told people about in that 50 years? Or if there's more than one, what are they?
Well, sure, there's lots of them. You can actually go on our website and get a pretty good sense of that. It's just iftf.org. But if you just take a couple examples, I'll give you an example of one we got right, one we got wrong. But the important thing to think about is that the way to evaluate a futurist is not did the forecasted future happen or not. That's the way you evaluate a fortune teller. The way you evaluate a futurist is, does the forecasted future provoke an insight that leads to action? So, for example, we were one of the first groups to forecast that the internet would be used for people communicating with people. That was not the original intent. It was originally data communication among defense contractors. So that was one we got right, and we worked with Procter & Gamble. They were one of the first companies, along with IBM, to actually have a social medium, what we would call a social medium today, around 1980, that they used within their R&D community to link them to do more effective R&D development. So they kind of got ahead of the curve because of that forecast, and we played a role. Secondly, one we got wrong. We've completely missed sport utility vehicles. If you look at the oil crisis and various oil shortages in the 70s or 80s, and when Japanese cars started to come here, it was pretty obvious that small cars were the way to go. We completely missed sport utility vehicles, SUVs. And that taught me that you have to be careful between what you think will happen and what you want to happen. And in that case, it was logical from a societal point of view to have small cars and more fuel-efficient cars. But the big cars were getting subsidized and still are to a real extent, and they provide perceived safety and more room. So it's when you're doing forecasting, you've got to play into the mix of both the rational and the emotional.
So let me ask you another question. Let me ask you about how you would classify the gentleman who predicted that the end of the world was supposed to come last Friday and it didn't quite happen.
Well, as I said, we don't do predictions, so I don't think I need to comment on that.
Okay. All right. So go ahead,
Dan,
John.
can I jump in with a question?
Sure.
Well, one of my favorite things is it's amazing how the science fiction writers of the 40s, 50s, and early 60s predicted all of the things that we now take for granted here in this 21st century. Why do you think they were so prescient and nobody paid attention to them?
Well, I think science fiction is great. It's a provocative, mind-stretching exercise, and you're right. There's been a lot of accurate forecasts built into science fiction, and there's been a lot of very inaccurate forecasts. So the challenge is, how do you sort out the signals from the noise? And just to link this to your audience, the small business audience, I think the challenge is, how can you see the future in the everyday world around you? We're very influenced by the William Gibson, another science fiction writer, quote, "The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed." And he talked about that in the book Neuromancer, which I'm sure you've read. And the idea of that is the future is already around us. We just have to be good at filtering the signals from the noise. So that's a lot of what we do. And I personally focus my life 10 years ahead, and I'm looking for those signals from today. And then I'm trying to boil those into a forecast. So, for example, in the new book, the base forecast, which is very relevant to your audience, the base forecast is that anything that can be distributed will be distributed. So there's this force now in this next generation of the internet, this next generation of hyper connectivity. There's this force that anything that can be distributed will be distributed. So what it means is shape-shifting organizations, as I talk about them in the new book, shape-shifting organizations will be the way to go. And in fact, many small businesses are that already. So in a real sense, what's happening now is it's possible for small, highly agile, highly flexible businesses to act as if they were large. And the challenge for very large organizations is, how can they be more flexible, more responsive in the context of, I teach at the Army War College, and the term they use is the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So we're moving into a world that will be increasingly VUCA, and yet there are these underlying principles, and there are the signals all around us. So one of the underlying principles is anything that can be distributed will be distributed. And one of the big pluses of being a small business is you're able to be more responsive, more shape-shifting in that kind of world.
But under that, one more question, Dan, and then back to you. But under that, is small business, the neighborhood cobbler, the neighborhood drugstore, et cetera, are they under attack to the point where they will become irrelevant?
Well, they could, unless they respond. The world, and again, we're working mostly with large companies, but the lessons apply across, and the book is geared toward large and small. For small businesses that are doing what you're talking about, retailing, for example, we're moving over the next decade. It's really the end of cyberspace as we know it, the end of either virtual shopping or in store. In effect, everybody's going to carry a virtual overlay on the physical world wherever they go. So if you're a convenience store, kind of mom and pop store, you're going to have to provide some kind of special service, or better yet, an experience that's better than just ordering it through Amazon or wherever and having it delivered at home. Lots of small businesses will do that. Some of them will come up with clever variations on the product, like your previous guest in the kind of designer coffee with health benefits. Those kind of things allow very small companies to have a very large impact through distribution channels like Amazon, for example. But what it means is that if you're a very small business competing with very large businesses in transactional worlds, you're going to have to move beyond transactions, because big companies like Amazon can do that a lot cheaper and a lot faster than you can. But they can't do services the way you can. They can't do experiences the way you can.
Back to you, Dan.
Thank you. I was fascinated listening to your discussion with Don, because what you're somewhat saying, or I believe you're saying, my interpretation is that a great many, perhaps thousands upon thousands of businesses that have been formed using the internet as a distribution channel, or Amazon, or direct to the customer, would not have been available or even have a chance to even be built under a traditional brick and mortar model before we had the internet.
That's right. That's right. I think that's largely true. And what you need in that kind of environment is to play into it. And the second big principle of the new book is the future. This future we're talking about will reward clarity, but it will punish certainty. So hierarchies are too certain, they're too rigid, they're too structured. But clarity, the way the military defines it, is be very clear where you're going, but very flexible how you get there. They actually call it commander's intent, or flexive command. And the best small businesses know how to do this already. But what it means is you have to have a clarity. That's why I was impressed you were pushing the new coffee company of what is your business? What is your business? What's your message? What's your clarity? And in this VUCA world, you want to be very clear where you're going, but very flexible how you get there. And that is what gives the flex to these shape-shifting organizations. So you can play a big company game with a very small company if you're smart about what your clarity is. But if you get too rigid about it, you're dead in this kind of world, because you lose sight of your clarity and you get punished if you're not able to respond.
So you've been compiling a 10-year, and if I heard you correctly, you did use the word forecast. Is that correct?
Yeah, we use the word forecast instead of predict, and forecast means a plausible, internal, consistent, provocative story from the future that's designed to provoke insight and to enable action.
So what are some of the things that you think, looking out 10 years, is likely to happen in this country and the world? Okay, well, I already mentioned two. This trend toward distribution is going to be a real big one. The whole notion of the job, the way that we think of it now, will be severely challenged and reimagined. So if you think of these shape-shifting organizations with no center, and they grow from the edges, hierarchies come and go. The good news is more flexibility, more ways to make a living, and they're great if you're ready. So there's work platforms like Upwork now, which are toward the humanistic end, or Amazon Turk, which is toward the slave labor end, where you can make a living without having an official job. And that's a big forecast for the future. So shape-shifting, anything that can be distributed, the whole notion of the job will be redefined. So the bad news is fewer traditional jobs inevitably.
And again, I'm a humble 10-year forecaster. I'm not an expert in the present. But one thing that disappointed me in the last presidential election was neither candidate faced up to that. Both of them talked about bringing jobs back to the United States. That's possible to a limited extent, but the traditional job is in great jeopardy over the next decade. There's just going to be fewer traditional jobs. On the other hand, there's more potential to make a living and a lot more flexibility. So those are three of the base forecasts. Here's another one. If you look 10 years ahead, what we think of as video gaming today will become the world's most powerful learning medium 10 years from now. So in other words, these abilities to immerse yourself in virtual worlds, today they're called video games, and a lot of today's video games are too sexual and too violent, in my opinion. But if you look at the medium, such as being played out through Twitch, which is now a broadcast medium for professional gamers, but it was just bought by Amazon. It's just becoming now a very vibrant, very rich, very vivid medium for learning. And the kids, those young people, 21 or less, as they enter the workforce, they're going to have a competitive advantage over all the rest of us because they grew up with these video gaming interfaces.
I'm curious about going back to one of your examples, and that is distribution. I'm trying to figure out where enhanced distribution is going to come from. I mean, I can see Amazon. You were talking about distribution, and that there's going to be my words, a revolution in distribution. There's going to be a lot more things or items distributed, and I was curious as to how how you see distribution expanding.
Well, I tell a whole history of this in the book, and it really began in 1964 when packet switching was invented. That's the core technology of the internet. It still is. And in those days, that was the Cold War. The networks were very centralized, and if any portion of the network was attacked, it would take down the whole network. Paul Barron, among other people, invented packet switching, where when you send a message, it gets broke down into packets and then doesn't get reassembled till the other end when it's received. So what it means is that organizations can get increasingly distributed. So that's the technology for it. It's taken a long time, more than 50 years, to become an overnight success now. And now what we're seeing is this inevitable push toward anything that can be distributed will be distributed. And it's very interesting. In the book, I talk about the original language of packet switching. It wasn't called that. It was called hot potato routing. And I really wish that name would have stuck, because that's the world we're setting up, where it's possible for small businesses and large businesses alike to set up distributed businesses, distributed organizations, distributed reward systems, distributed everything, essentially. That's the direction of change we're moving. Hierarchies will still work in more predictable, controlled, stable environments. It's just there aren't going to be that many of those anymore. So the force will be toward distribution in this very uncertain world, this VUCA world all around us, which gets back to the need for clarity.
We're back here with Bob Johansen. He has a fascinating book, and he's certainly got a fascinating mind. Tell us more.
Okay. So just to get back to the kids for a minute, I'm convinced that young people 21 or less are going to change the world, and I'm really optimistic about that generation of kids. And if they have hope, they're utterly inspiring, and they're able to do things that haven't ever been done before. If they're hopeless, they're dangerous. They're potentially dangerous, because then they're all connected one way or another. Even poor kids now are connected pretty well. 10 years from now, they'll be very connected. So essentially, all of us are in the hope game. particularly with regard to young people. And young people have things to teach us. I grew up with the internet, so, I had an online identity in the early 70s. And when I finished my PhD, my very first professional paper was at the conference where the internet was publicly introduced. So I've grown up with it. But I'm not a digital native. And these kids are, the 21 or less. So I think the challenge for all of us as adults is how to provide realistic hope. By learning from these kids, by taking the many skills that they have in these new media, and then figuring out how to amplify it. And I think small business is the way that a lot of this will happen. There's a lot of kids growing up that will be successful, will have ways of making a living, that won't ever have an official job.
So let's go back to your. I think that's interesting because there's we could talk about that particular subject for probably the rest of our time, but I want to go back and ask you a question about what does your 10-year crystal ball think about the condition of the world over the next 10 years?
Okay, so again, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not doing predictions. Our take, looking 10 years out, is it will be a VUCA world, and it's going to get increasingly VUCA. The single word I'm using to describe the next decade is scramble. It will be a scramble. So many things that have been stuck will get unstuck. But as best I can tell, and again, I'm a humble 10-year forecaster, not an expert in the present, as best I can tell, the people doing the unsticking won't be very good at putting them back together. So there'll be a lot of unintended consequences, which make it a ripe time for innovation if you're ready. But you have to get beyond the polarities of the present to be ready for this world. It's not about short-term political value debates. It's about having that clarity of long-term direction. So that's what wins in this world, is great clarity of direction, great flexibility of execution. But, the big picture crystal ball view is it's going to be a scramble. It's going to be volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This is the most frightening forecast I've ever done in 35 years of doing this, but it's also the most hopeful. It's just like the stakes are up in this world.
So is the I don't know what the right word is. The volatility that you're seeing, is it coming from all corners of the world, or is it coming from major countries, which will spill over eventually into the lesser developed countries? Where's the impact?
Well, the impact is global, and there's three big things that are global. Life has always been a VUCA world to some extent, beginning from the fact we all have to die. And there's been VUCA pockets of the world forever with wars and famines and the like. I'm talking globally now, and there's three things that are very unusual over the next decade, all of which are creating global VUCA challenges. One of them is global climate disruption. The second is cyber terrorism. And the third is what I call weaponized synthetic biology. So on July 17th, DARPA, our Advanced Research Project Agency, issued a request for proposals for what they call the Safe Genes Project, which is all about gene drivers. So again, humble futurist, sociology PhD, talking about synthetic biology. But my understanding of that is that it's the use of synthetic biology for warfare in a very asymmetrical world. So those are the three big VUCA shifts over the next decade. All of them are global in impact.
They're also very scary.
Very scary, but as I said, this is the most hopeful forecast I've ever done. And all of it links back to the hyperconnectivity. So for the first time, we actually have the ability to address global climate disruption. We actually have the ability to not eliminate, but to respond to cyber terrorism. We actually have the ability to get more engaged with safe genetics and safe synthetic biology. But it requires deep science knowledge, and it requires engagement with these things, not denial of them.
One of the things that I'm having difficulty with, not with just you, but a lot of the quote science, is on the impact of climate change. And the climate, since the beginning of time, has always changed. And to think that man can turn it off or turn it on to make it better, I'm having difficulty with that, and I'm having difficulty because I look at the models that predict what's going to happen, at the beginning of the next century, and we need to be able to do things to create differences that will affect the atmosphere. I mean, I want to throw a question at you. If tomorrow, let's take your model, your forecast, your 10-year forecast, your 10-year model. If tomorrow you read on the front page of the New York Times that somebody discovered a way to eliminate CO2 emissions from every smokestack in the world, would that be an impact on what you're thinking?
Oh, sure. That would be a signal. So those are what we call wild cards. There are black swans is another term that's sometimes used. It's a low or uncertain probability event that if it did occur, it would have a high impact. And just to clarify, we could do a whole show on global climate disruption, and we don't have time to do that. That's just one of the things I've mentioned. We're not an advocacy group, so we're not an environmental group. We're not advocating any future. We're really good at finding the world's best experts on any topic. We started studying global climate disruption in the 70s, so it's been a very long-term look. According to the best science out there now, there's something happening. Depending on whose model you believe, it could be happening sooner rather than later. But it's a big enough deal that as an independent nonprofit forecasting group, we put it as one of the three big disruptors out on the horizon. Any of these forecasts are debatable. The future is unpredictable. Somebody tells you they can predict the future, you shouldn't believe them, especially if they're from California. But the purpose here isn't to predict, it's to provoke. And we want to look at the best research out there and then say, okay, if this is true, what are the insights? What are the possible actions? And that's the kind of conversation we're having in a very compressed form this morning.
Right.
This afternoon, sorry.
Whatever.
Dan, can I jump in?
Sure.
First off, Mr. Johansen, you have to assume that Dan would read the New York Times, which but that's another story. But the combination of the various earthquakes and hurricanes, etc., that we're seeing, are they a harbinger of something, or there's something we should just put in to the hopper and discuss at another time?
I don't know, honestly. As I said, my PhD is in sociology. I'm a long-term forecaster. I'm just reporting the results of our latest forecast. The general response I'd give to that is probably individual events. You can't extrapolate from them. But there does appear to be a pattern, and most of the experts we talk to say, yes, something important is happening here. So I would suggest we draw the link back to small business and what all this means for small business. Is that okay?
Yes. Well, we only have a couple of minutes, so I'll let Dan have the final two questions.
Well, how would you like to draw it back to small business? How is what you're talking about going to affect the opportunities for small business in America today and the next 10 years?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'd suggest is it's actually easier to look 10 years ahead than it is 1 or 2. So if you're a small business person, you're overwhelmed with the present, and there's all these pressures. But if you look 10 years ahead and say, what are those future forces? And, the new book will give you my hint of that. There's other hints out there. So you look 10 years ahead, and then you work backwards. So I think that's the first big clue in a VUCA world to find your clarity. Go 10 years out in your particular sector, and then work backwards. It's easier than staying in the short run. The second thing is, don't try to catch up. In this kind of world, the present is very temporary and it's consistent in constant turmoil. So don't try to catch up, but it's a great time to leapfrog. So don't just look at what your competitors are doing. Look 10 years ahead at the direction of change. Figure out how you can leapfrog. And then third, articulate your clarity in a way that's so compelling that you repeat it over and over again each day. So your workers, your customers, your competitors, they have a very clear idea what you're doing and where you're going. So I think these new leadership literacies that I outline in the new book, which is called The New Leadership Literacies, those literacies are enough to not only help you survive, they're enough to help you thrive, because in this kind of world, I think small business will have an advantage because you have that agility, you have that shape-shifting ability, you know about how hierarchies come and go, so you're going to be able to compete with the big companies who are still stuck in a more brittle hierarchical model.
Well, let me ask you only one more question. I'm curious as to where, or does it fit in your forecasting mechanism, in your 10-year look? Where does politics fit into the equation?
We don't focus directly on politics. There are think tanks like Brookings or the Hoover Institution here at Stanford that do focus more on politics. We're big picture 10-year forecasting, looking globally at external future forces. So politics is one of the variables for us, but we're not a geopolitical forecasting group. So a group like CSIS in Washington, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, that's more of a political think tank. We're more of a big picture futures think tank.
But if you look at it from the standpoint of the Paris Accord with, 119 signatories, isn't that one of those major influences that with so many governments around the world, even though we're not in it, but many other governments around the world that are participating in this, that's a political statement as far as supporting the change in the climate, but politically it will also then turn into how will that affect businesses and what they can and can't do in the future world, trying to comply with this global political initiative. Sure,
and that's we're interested in it, and if you think the model we use, and it's described in the book, is foresight, insight, action. And we focus on foresight, 10 or more years ahead, external, outside in future forces. The climate accord lives down there in the Paris Agreement, lives down in the action space, and we're interested in that as it influences the foresight space. So we would be following that, but we're not engaged in it at a highly granular level. We're not consultants. We're not telling people what to do. We're just saying, here are the external future forces. And indeed, one of the big lessons here is some of the best forecasts are those you don't like. And the point of it isn't to argue or agree with the forecast. It's to let the forecast provoke your insight, and then you decide what to do.
Dan, I hate to break it up, but we have to call it a day. It's been fascinating. Bob, your book again and how people can get it?
Well, you can get it anywhere. It's on Amazon. It's called The New Leadership Literacies. And if you just do newleadershipliteracies.org, you can get to the book website, or you can find it on Amazon. My name is Bob Johansen, Johansen.
Well, it's been fascinating. It has been for me. I've been kind of sitting here listening. What do you think, Dan?
I thought this is obviously a book I got to read because I consider myself somewhat of a futurist, trying to look down the road, and I'm always interested in people that have different point of views. So I'll get your book and take a look at it. And thank you for being on with us today. I enjoyed the conversation, and we'll put your link to your website on our website by sometime this evening.
Okay, thanks so much. And for all the small business people out there, I grew up in a small business, and I'm cheering you on.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.